Welcome back to the City Current Show. I'm your host, Jeremy Park. We're always honored to bring you inspiring stories of individuals and organizations making a difference and powering the good. And we're honored to be with Becky Sharpe. She's the CEO of International Scholarship and Tuition Services, and she's also president of the Nashville chapter of the Private Directors Association. We'll talk all about both of those organizations. But Becky, how are you doing?
I am fabulous, thank you. Although it's hot and muggy in Nashville, I figure I'm getting a free sauna.
That's a good way to look at it, absolutely. Well, let's go ahead and start with you being CEO of International Scholarship and Tuition Services. Let's start there. Go ahead and give us some background for the company and the organization.
Sure. So I bought this company back in 2002. In fact, I just had my 20th anniversary there. So such a privilege to be a part of this organization. And what we do is we manage scholarship and tuition reimbursement programs for large companies. So we get to give money away when those companies have scholarship programs or reimburse their employees when they go back to school and get certifications or degrees.
Talk about on your end, the kind of the magic of making it easy for companies, and on the same time, the impact of being able to help individuals and manage these scholarships. I think on both sides, you're helping, but you're also making an impact.
You're so right. And what's great is a client told us the other day with a little bit of emotion, it was fun because she said that the person in our company who was working with her just changed her life because he took the stress out of it. And we also try to have an environment where we try to make it fun and easy for people to be their best. That means we don't take ourselves too seriously. We try to listen well and problem solve and not just be the smartest people in the room, but the best listeners. And then to really stay in our lane about what we do best. We're not a fast food company, we're a scholarship management company. So we really do that well and just try to continue to lather, rinse, repeat that process.
Talk about that in the context of competitive environment when it comes to competing for the best talent. And when you talk about talent attraction and especially retention, scholarships do play an important role in that. And so talk about that as a benefit for companies and what you're seeing on that regard for talent.
Well, boy, and I don't know about you, but I remember being burdened with student loan debt. And what that does, it just sort of stops you in your tracks. So if a company has a scholarship program that is really good and helps people get out of school without debt or without significant debt, or if they're looking for talent who's walking around the universe, looking for a great job, looking for a great corporate culture, and they're comparing these two awesome companies, and one also provides student loan forgiveness or can help them advance their degree, they absolutely are going to have the upper edge. I think also in terms of corporate culture, what it says is we value knowledge accumulation. And that's so important because I'm in my 50s, the generation of my kids in their middle 20s, they want to be respected for expanding their knowledge, and they want to be encouraged to do that and learn.
Before we dive over and talk about the Private Directors Association, give me one more thing that you wish everyone knew about International Scholarship and Tuition Services.
Oh my goodness. Our people are the best. We have the best people. So I could brag on them all day. They're caring, loving, respect each other. And we have a very intentionally diverse workforce that's very important to me.
Well, as I mentioned at the onset, you are president of the Nashville chapter of the Private Directors Association. So talk about what led you to the association, and then we'll talk about you being president. So what led you to the organization?
Well, so a good friend of mine roped me in, but what I'll say is why I was attracted to it was because of a little bit of embarrassment. The first board service I did, I was not prepared. And so I made some mistakes, and it was embarrassing for me and didn't represent me at my best. And so it just got to me a little bit that I wanted to help other people not make the same mistake I did, which was showing up unprepared. And I had not been mentored in how to be a good board member, how to be a great board member. So when this opportunity came to join PDA, whose mission is all about education and learning to be an excellent board member, I jumped on it.
And so go ahead and dive in. Obviously, you are president of the Nashville chapter, but there's a national organization. And so talk about nationally what the organization does, and then obviously all the efforts locally as well.
Sure. So the mission of PDA nationally is around board education and helping people become the best board members they can be, and also to prepare them for board roles. We do have companies who ask us to post board seats, although the primary mission of the organization is not necessarily to get someone a board seat, it's to prepare them should that board seat come along. And in Nashville, what's wonderful is we have such a great community of leaders here in Nashville, and there are new companies coming to town all the time, as we all know. And so we're also working on creating, if you will, a portfolio of highly diverse experience, all sorts of diversity, potential board members. So companies that are moving to Nashville can find people who would make excellent board members in an easier fashion.
You hear often about the power of a board, and obviously for nonprofits, it's a must-have, they have to have them, but the power of being able to have diverse thought, diverse skill sets, all these different, really amazing assets for nonprofits to help guide them to stay true to their mission. In this case, talk about that for a for-profit entity, for a company, and the power of having good governance and a board.
Sure. And so one of the mistakes, especially an entrepreneur will make, or a family-owned business, is they start this flywheel, and all of a sudden their business is so big and they're doing great. And they look around and their advisors are often friends and family. And that can be tough, because what if the friends and family member was a great advisor when the board was at when the company was at 500,000, but now at 5 or 20 or 50 million, they're not. And so you can create this conflict of this person I really love and like in my life, but who really doesn't have the skill set to help. So the idea about a board is to bring people on who already have that skill and talent. They can walk in and say, hey, let me tell you all the things to avoid because I've been there. And let me tell you the things that really made a difference. And they do this by sharing experience, not hyperbole or hypothesis.
And I think on both ends, it's helping to guide the company, but also too, like you're talking about, creating a large pool of qualified candidates who can step in and really be that powerful board to help guide. And on both ends, it ends up being a win-win. Let's start with a company. For those who don't have a board, but are looking at this as a powerful opportunity, talk about where to begin.
So the easiest thing, the way I sort of think linearly, so I put it into into quadrants. So if you can think about, you've got sales, marketing, operations, technology, IT, HR, finance in general at any company. And so if someone were to look and say, where are the gaps? Where do I not really have leadership? Where am I winging it a little bit? Where am I being successful, but not because I'm following some strategy? So if you've got a leader who's a fabulous technologist, but who doesn't understand how sales and marketing works, maybe she or he should bring someone on the board who has a deep level marketing and sales experience, or vice versa. So if you look at those areas of any company and then define where there might be gaps in experience, especially if people have grown with the company, you might have a CFO who started as your accounting manager and just got promoted because of loyalty, but really has never been a CFO before. And that's so common. And so the idea is to really be able to honestly look at those gaps and then find people with experience in them.
One of the other big pieces is DE&I. And when you talk about diversity, equity, and inclusion, it is extremely important for companies, obviously, to focus on this, and just like nonprofits and other organizations. Talk about that from the scope of a board and how that plays a pivotal role as well.
Well, it not only plays a pivotal role, but I believe it's the umbrella under which all companies should exist if you want to exist at the highest level of revenue and profits. Because the more diverse opinions you have, diversity of experience, diversity of upbringing, diversity of culture, race, gender, all these things will help you understand how the market is going to look at your product or service. So the more diverse you can have at all levels of the organization, the better your company is going to do. You can find reams of material showing profitability and tenure and stay, the more diverse a company is at all levels, but especially at the board level. When companies make the mistake of diversifying from the bottom up, they're just not going to get there as quickly. And I've seen that in many cases. When the board becomes diverse, then things get fast-tracked within the organization. When I mean things, I mean innovative ideas and access to new markets not seen before when the board is undiverse.
For you, you mentioned personally that you were underprepared stepping in, your first role. And obviously, you said, hey, I want to do something about this and get the education. And that's where this started. Give me one or two things for those as individuals who, definitely want to step in and be good board members. What are some words of encouragement, some words of advice?
So if you haven't ever served on a board, absolutely step up and serve on a board of a not-for-profit that has an alignment with something you're passionate about. So whether it's child welfare or animals or homelessness, joining a not-for-profit board is a great way to begin to get your board chops, if you will. But once you're on that board, it's real important that you come as number one serving the board. So the mistake, I'll just throw mine out there. The mistake I made was I didn't realize that this was not a social gathering. And so I just talked a little bit too much and shared a little bit too many stories. And thank goodness someone who cared about me said, so love to hear from you, but 11 minutes of catching up is too much in a 90-minute board meeting. And so I realized immediately with some embarrassment, but something I could change. Okay, so my job really is a quick check-in, and then the focus is on the agenda of the board. And that's easy to learn. There are a lot of people with great skills and talent. So I'd say if it's your first time on the board, watch, listen, and ask someone to find the oldest, most experienced person in the room and say, hey, can we have lunch? Let me pick your brain. Will you tell me how I'm doing at a meeting, and get some real honest feedback?
These are all things that you focus on. And when you talk about kind of the educational side, resources, so carry that forward into this conversation, but yet really everything you do with the Private Directors Association, so the PDA, put this in context of workshops and resources and all the things that you all do.
So it's really neat. In fact, right before this call, I was interviewing someone out in California who's a PDA member, and he's got this really neat book. And so I'm going to do an interview similar to we're doing right now on holding CEOs accountable. And so one of the great things about PDA is we've got chapters all around the country. And because of COVID, it's become completely normal for me to hop into a conference call that they're doing or a Zoom across this country. They record them all. And so there's just a library. It's almost overwhelming of any board topic you could possibly want to listen to. You can do so live and ask the person questions, or you can listen to it after the fact and just learn. In the Nashville chapter, we've had speakers, everything from family boards. We had the Ingram board in, to several people who just talked about board functionality and dysfunction. We had cybersecurity, which is constantly being talked about now. And then we also do some socials that are designed to just let our members get to know each other better. And I'll just add one thing, that's another key component to successful board is taking the time outside the board meeting to understand who the other board members are. A lot of times people will just have that board meeting and then disengage. And the more you know someone, the more likely it is you can collaborate.
Absolutely. And I think the collaboration, whether it's a board retreat or different, more social versus, purely business function, they allow you to get to know each other on a deeper level. But to your point, when it comes to innovation and cross-pollinating ideas and just throwing new things out there, it leads to some really creative ideas that wouldn't have happened in a normal, just business focused, specifically stick to the agenda type of a meeting. And so I agree, those sort of opportunities lead to really powerful new opportunities in the future. I'm curious on the CEO conversation side. Many times when you talk about a corporate board, egos can play a powerful role in this. And so for CEOs, especially ones who started the company themselves, how do you manage, what's a tip around managing the board with a CEO, especially one that's a little bit more strongly willed? So talk about some of those nuances on the ego and the politics.
Well, so part of that is the vetting process. So if I were given the honor of being considered for a board position and it got down to them liking me, what's really important is to keep my ego in check and say, let's talk to the other board members, and to be able to have a question with the CEO directly and say, so if I, because of my experience, saw you about to fall into a pit that I've fallen into before, and I mentioned this in a board meeting, what is your reaction likely to be? Are you going to be embarrassed, ashamed, and judgmental? Or are you going to be curious and interested and appreciative? And just that question alone is important to ask before you join a board, because you've got a hot-headed CEO who is always the right person, the most intelligent person in the room, and just wants to continually on, it's probably not going to be functional for many board members. One of the things that I do is I talk about speaking truth to power. Now, speaking truth to power, especially if it's a real problem, sometimes has to be done privately, sometimes has to be done delicately through maybe talking to the board chair and bringing up this thing that's happening. But if you really want to be a productive board member, you need to be comfortable doing that. So within the appropriate rails of whether it's done privately versus in a public board setting.
Yeah, that's great advice. And I think that advice sticks on a lot of fronts for sure. But to your point, knowing that you're coming from the right place and the experience and being able to articulate that based on my experience, here are the pitfalls and here's why I think this might not be the best decision. And on the other side of the equation, knowing that person, that CEO, does ultimately have the best intention and want to do what's best, and it might go against what they personally think is the right fit. But at the end of the day, it's right for the team. And so being able to check the egos is a very important piece of the equation to ultimately drive team success. And so knowing how to handle that with grace is definitely powerful. So great advice. Give me one more tip in general when it comes to board service that you know is a top of mind or just one of your favorites.
Be prepared. So read the board meeting notes before you go, review the financials. Don't just phone it in. Take some time to reread, and then contemplate so that you can come up with some creative questions, so that you ask more questions of the CEO, because sometimes those questions will lead, usually it's 2 layers down the onion peel. So be sure and prepare for your board meetings in depth.
Nice. Good stuff. So wrap up with website contact information. Where can we go to learn more about International Scholarship and Tuition Services, as well as the Nashville chapter of the Private Directors Association?
Sure. ISTS is at apply.ists.com. And then the Private Directors Association is on LinkedIn. If you look up Private Directors Association, and the Nashville chapter is prominently listed as well if you look for both the Nashville chapter and Private Directors Association.
Well, Becky, thank you for being a guest on the show. Greatly appreciate all you and your amazing team do. Thank you so much.
Hey, thank you so much for your time. And I hope you stay cool out here in this Nashville swamp.